I'm Coach Seb, and this is Running New Mexico.
All right, joining me today, I have AJ Jones. They are a trail runner based out of Albuquerque. They recently completed the Oregon Cascades 100 in 31 hours and 30 minutes, and really happy to have you on. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first question is, how did you get into running?
Well, I did track in high school, and I did sprinting in high school and javelin. And I didn't really love running very much. It wasn't until I think I was 21 and a friend asked me to do a 10K with them. And I was like, doesn't really sound fun, but it was a way to just hang out regularly a couple times a week and run together. So I said okay, and we trained for that race, and I just loved it. Like once I was actually into the training and did the event, I was really into it, and so from then on, it just continued. And I was going through a hard time that I've mentioned before. In another podcast and feed, and it was just a great outlet mentally as well. Very healing. And so I just stuck with it and been running ever since.
It's amazing, the people who talk about getting into running and not being runners or not being distance runners, being sprinters or in other sports in high school, and then they find their way to it, and there's just something about it, like you said, like it can be so meditative, healing, like just allow you that space to be you and think.
Yeah, absolutely. I often say it's meditative, that sound of your feet, just that rhythm. You can just concentrate on that, or you can, you know, see how many different bird sounds you hear while you're running, that sort of thing. Or if you want to completely check out, you can listen to a podcast or music for the day. If you've, had a hard day and you need that mental space. So yeah, it's really healing and it's helpful in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. It is interesting. I do like to run with some music or podcasting a decent amount of time, and doesn't matter what I'm listening to, as much as I like it, as much as I'm into it, my mind still goes anyway. I disassociate from what I'm listening to whatever chatter is in my head anyway.
Huh. Yeah, I don't find that happens to me as much. I'm able to concentrate on conversations, but music, that definitely happens. Music doesn't keep my mind as occupied as listening to a conversation.
And I can see that for sure. How did you bridge that gap? How did you go from I'm going to do a 10K with my friend to now you're at a 100 miler? And obviously there's been some time in between that, but where did that even come into your head? Like, I think I want to head for this.
Yeah, quite a bit of time, in fact. I'm turning 40 this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it just snuck right up on me. Here's 40. Um, so I slowly over the years have done longer and longer races. I didn't do, let's see, I think it was the most I did was maybe a half marathon until maybe 20, let's see, 2000 and maybe 7 or 8, I want to say, is when I did my first marathon. I did a trail marathon in Portland, and I just loved that I could run that long on a trail in the middle of Portland. And I could hear traffic from a freeway nearby, but you couldn't see any traffic. And I trained on the Bosque here in Albuquerque for that marathon even. So, I'm used to like trail running here while training, but to do an actual event that, never touched a road or a paved surface was really fun. And I did a few more trail marathons after that, and lots of half marathons. But last year, I decided after I worked at a place that was a pretty toxic environment, and it was really, really hard on my mental health, and it was stressful. And I found in those 4 years that I worked there that my stress level was so high that I wasn't able to incorporate good stress like running into my life. And I just desperately missed running. And so after that job ended, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to get back into running. But not only that, I want to get back into running in a big way. I want to finally do an ultra because I had always wanted to. I thought it was amazing that people could run that far. And so I decided to sign up for 50K and just go for it last year. And that was in November. That was the Bigfoot, Bosque Bigfoot. And that race was just so much fun because it was in the Bosque where I'm used to running, trails I know. And I didn't even know I was leading that race for the whole race. I didn't realize I was the first place in the female category that I was signed up for.
Wow.
And then after I finished, someone let me know I came in second, and I realized who had passed me on the very last 8-mile loop, probably only like 3 miles before the finish.
Oh, wow.
But nobody had ever told me that I was leading. So that was a really funny experience for a first 50K. I was just out there having a blast. I loved it. I had so much fun, and my family came to support me. My in-laws and my spouse, they were there, and my spouse crewed for me, and they were there at every stop with like, the list I had written out of what to give me and everything. So that was a really, really fun experience. And not only did I sign up for that first ultra because of just wanting to like jump back in and have good stress in my life instead of bad stress again, but a few years back, we had been trying to start a family, and I went through the process of carrying or trying to carry uh, for my spouse actually, and it didn't stick. And we, part of that was the job I was working at the time, and I had to be on my feet, like even when I wasn't well. And my boss actually made me even work through my miscarriages while miscarrying. Like that's how bad the place was that I worked at. But after that, I felt like I just wanted to prove to myself that my body could still do hard things. And so signing up for an ultra and getting back into running, that was my way to prove to myself that like I was still like my body was still strong and it could do hard things, even if I couldn't, carry a kid for us.
Right. Wow, that is.
So
I am so sorry. That is. I mean, I really don't know what to say to that other than sorry, because I know that can be very tough. And I mean, a lot tough, as tough as a 100-miler is. That's something you're training for and expecting to do, and the stresses and mental aspect of having to go through that is very difficult.
yeah, it really was. And so a lot of these ultras I've done in the past year have been really healing for me. And when I first got into running, I was healing from losing my son, Christian. And so there was kind of like a parallel to that in a way of, jumping into these ultras and proving to myself that I could do it, and, healing from, the pain of not being able to carry again, and start a family. So that first, 50K I completed last year was a big milestone for me. It's not too much longer than a marathon, but mentally, since it's called an ultra, it was, a really big deal for me.
And I think that's great. Again, that it was in a place that you were familiar with and able to do that. Obviously, you had
Yeah,
other reasons to be doing this, but had you known that you were in first place, do you think you would have fought a little bit harder to keep up?
absolutely. Yeah. I had no idea. And it was funny because there was volunteers that I had gone to school. There was one guy in particular that was volunteering at a key point that you just pass over and over. And he would say, hi, and how are you doing? And you're looking good, and all of that stuff, as I went by. And we were I'd slow down and we'd be chatty. I just had no idea. And I was so surprised that he didn't tell me, the race director didn't tell me, nobody let me know. Like, my spouse didn't realize. They're not a runner. Like, they'll run with me, but they're not like really big into races. And if there is a 5K that I can find that has like a non-binary sign up, then they'll join me for stuff like that. But they're not going to sign up for a race that doesn't have a non-binary category. So they don't do very many events with me. But yeah, so nobody had any clue, or nobody let me know so that I had a clue.
Wow, that's a little crazy. And
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
it's a looped course, right?
Yeah, so it's a little over 8 miles loop. I think the end race was like almost a mile extra, which is pretty common,
Yeah.
and people had warned me, so I was prepared for that. I don't mind if I know ahead of time.
Well, I know in your write up of the 100, you talked about talking to other people who had done 100, and so I'm assuming you did the same for the 50K. But as much as you talk to people, like, so much is individual. So,
Yeah.
what did you not know going into the 50K that you kind of found out during and after?
Um, so something that happened to me during that first ultra that didn't happen to me while running marathons even, is that rotating pain. I don't know if you've experienced that, but like, you're running and your right knee is kind of bothering you, and you just run through it, and a few more miles later your left ankle starts to feel kind of funny, and then a few miles after that, it's your left hamstring. And so the last 4 miles of that first ultra, it was like that nonstop, and I wasn't as mentally prepared for that, I guess, because I hadn't experienced that in past races, and it had been a while since I had completed even a marathon distance. I just jumped right into, going for it with training. I had a good base, but I hadn't done any longer races in a few years.
That just jumping into it seems like a common theme for a lot of ultra runners. It's just like, oh yeah, I just decided I was going to do it, and so I
Yeah,
did it.
yeah, yeah. I did feel like my training was a little bit stunted, but I actually really liked the training program that I did for that, better than the training that I did this past year for the 100. And um, definitely, I'm keeping that in mind for future races, like the two different training plan styles. And Yeah. So I will definitely probably tweak my training moving forward, that it would be a little bit more like the training I did for my first ultra.
Nice. Where did you find those trainings?
I want to say the training plan I did for my 50K, my first 50K, I found it on like Runner's World or something. And it was actually for a 50 mile,
Oh,
but I just abbreviated it and adjusted mileage because I'd done that so many times. I pretty much usually put together my own training plan, tweaked off of other things that I find, but I was intimidated to make my own plan completely for an ultra, so I did a little research first, and stuck more to something someone else had made, and I did the same thing for my training for my 100. I found a plan that was for that distance, but the styles were completely different. I definitely liked the one that I did last year, way better. This one was more structured, like you always ran this day, you always had this day off, that sort of thing. And the one that I had used for my 50K was really sporadic. And I couldn't tell you the science behind it, but it worked. So I would have, and my speed work was like never the same. So I had it all written down and I would just go look at it for the day and I wouldn't think ahead on it, and I would see what my workout for the day was, and then I would go do it. And there was way too much like knowing exactly what I was going to do for the 100 training. I think it wasn't as, it didn't change up days or anything like
right.
that as much.
So that predictability wasn't a good fit for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
funny.
And I loved,
I was just gonna say a lot of people really enjoy that. Like, I know every Tuesday I'm gonna do this, or I know every Sunday I'm gonna be doing this, and so that's so interesting that you kind of liked that more unstructured almost.
yeah. Yeah, I did. And I think part of that was the workouts within that unstructured plan were always different. There were workouts that I'd never done before, and I think that that worked for my body to try all these new different ways to do a speed workout. And I learned a lot from that plan. And so I tried to incorporate a couple of those speed workouts here and there, but it wasn't quite as sporadic as the the plan.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, if you're gonna kind of combine two plans, it seems a lot of times you have to kind of know ahead of time that that's what you're gonna do. Otherwise, you end up trying to throw things in that maybe might not be at the right time. At least from what I've noticed working with different plans.
Yeah. Yeah, I really wanted to switch back, but I didn't, like mid training for my 100, just because I was worried about messing up, my training.
That makes sense. So, did you do any other races between the 50K and the 100 miler?
Yeah, I did quite a few. I actually wouldn't be able to list them all off for you. Lots of small ones too. So let's see. I actually have them all like on a on my calendar
Oh, wow.
marked off what I did. So, and not all of them are on here because I didn't plan for all of them. I like threw in smaller races as they would come up if they sort of fit. So, um, yeah. And back in April, I did the Albuquerque half marathon, which was a road marathon, half marathon. And I thought it'd be fun to just, see what a road race was about again since it'd been a long time. And I just kind of wanted to see where I was at in comparison to when I was younger, and I did like sprinkle in more road races. And
Nice.
then also in April, I did the Cedro Peak Marathon.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and then in June, I did the Flagstaff Big Pine Trail Runs 54K, and I turned that one into a 58K by accident because I gave myself some bonus miles of doing a little loop twice. I had made friends with a couple of seasoned runners who had done 100 milers before, and I was really chatty with them, getting advice. And one of them, Deb, hung back and decided to let me and Albert was the other person I was running with go ahead and keep up the pace that we were doing. And we just chatted the entire race until probably the last 5 miles or so, and then he kind of took off on me. And I was keeping it chill that day, so I didn't push it because I had a 50 miler the next month planned. But since we were chatting so much about getting advice for his, 100 miles he's done in the past, we didn't pay close enough attention to turns and added a few miles onto that race. Showed up at an aid station, and we had gotten to know them there, and they were like, "You're not supposed to be here again. We've seen you enough times." And we realized that, we did some bonus miles. And then, let's see, the last race that I did, the one that's not on my training plan, was I jumped in on an 8-mile course in Santa Fe. It was a night run, and I can't remember the name of it now, actually. But several local runner friends were doing it, and I said, okay, I need to practice running at night in the dark anyways. I'll jump in and do that race. And so I went up to Santa Fe and did that race. I think that was the beginning of July. And then I did the Grand Mesa 50-mile in Grand Mesa, Colorado. And that race, I highly recommend. It was just beautiful, the most beautiful course I've run yet. And epic views, like good climbs. You run past countless lakes, and the crew there is just amazing. It seemed like a good number of runners camped there. The whole parking lot was full. We all camped together. Everybody was really chill and quiet, which was really nice since I had the opposite experience at the Arizona race that I did the month before. And so that race was, the 50-miler was 1 month before the 100-miler.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, that's decently close for that many miles.
Yeah, I was trying to find one that fit into the plan, but I think it was a week closer than it was supposed to be. But, it's hard to find the exact distance at the exact time often that fits within your training plan. And then, we don't have a ton of races here that are ultras in New Mexico like you can find in some states like Washington or Oregon.
Right.
So I just kind of had to do a wide search, including Arizona and Colorado, and try to figure out something that would work relatively close to my training plan.
Yeah, it's we have such an amazing place to run, but it takes a lot to put on those races, and it's there's not as many as I think there could or should be.
Yeah, agreed. But I know it's a lot of work, so it takes
Exactly.
the right person to start putting on all these events that we would love to have.
Right. Because I'm not signing up for that.
Yeah, me neither.
So, how did you come across the Cascades 100? Like, how did that come onto your radar that that's the one that you were going to do?
So, I think it just popped up in Ultra Sign Up. I like to just look through races and see what's out there. And then I feel like not shortly after I found it, I feel like someone I was following, I saw a post that they did of doing it the year before, I want to say. And so, like, it came to me multiple times. So then it like kind of stuck in my head. And the other thing about that race in particular is that I went to high school near there.
Okay.
I went to high school in Lapine, and I didn't have a great experience growing up there, and going to school there. Um, like, especially being queer, like, it was very clear at that high school that it was extremely unsafe to come out or even acknowledge that part about you. And I didn't come out until I was in my early 20s. And I think a lot of that actually had to do with the teasing and the bullying that was like heavily there in that school.
Yeah.
And so, uh, I don't know. It also felt like fitting to run like a big hard race in a place that had been hard on me. To go back there and like, conquer this distance, but also like do it in a place that, in a way of like reclaiming it as like a good place for myself, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful reason to do that. Kind of take back that like hold over you, if there's any hold. Like it's just that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's awesome. I saw that it started in Bend, Oregon, and I
Yeah.
used to go to a running camp that was um, stationed outside of there when I was in high school. The
Hmm.
Steens Mountain running camp, and it was. I saw that, and I got all these little flashback memories because I really enjoyed that area running wise. Like it was
Yeah.
beautiful. It reminded me a lot of parts of New Mexico.
Oh yeah. Yeah, in fact, going to high school there in Central Oregon is what made me decide that I wanted to move somewhere that was a desert to go to college. I liked the high desert weather. I liked the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter. And so when I was deciding where to go to college, I specifically looked at Arizona and New Mexico, having gone to high school in a high desert area. And I had grown up and lived in Portland most of my life. So it was a completely different, climate. And I was just excited to live somewhere, that had the heat in the summer and plenty of sunshine, not much rain.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I would go out there and it would just be kind of rainy, and it just amazed me. Like because I'd always go to Portland first before going down because I had a family friend there, and
Yeah.
just how green and wet and a different type of green, I guess I should say, because we do get green here, just different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's nice to. It was just such a different spot.
Yeah. Yeah, and the humidity up there actually bothers me when I'm running because I have asthma. And it seems to like bother my asthma for some reason. So I actually run better here at elevation than I do low elevation in the humidity, in Oregon. So yeah, I wasn't too worried about running the 100, because I knew the desert weather there. And I wasn't worried about the heat. I do actually pretty good in the heat here running. My family's always surprised by it if they go on a run with me and it's like, 80 degrees out and I'm perfectly fine. And they're like, what is going on? I can't do this. I got to go home. You continue on without me. I won't take them out on my 90-degree runs, but I do those too just fine.
I do not. I'm with them. I'm not a heat runner. as
Yeah.
soon as this temperature drops, like for me, I'm just like, oh, this is so much better. My pace gets better. My mood improves. Like everything.
I don't know. I think it's the thing is like you're already hot, like running. Your body's already hot. Your muscles are warm. And for whatever reason, that just seems to work for my body just fine. I mean, the longer the run, the less, you know, happy my body is about it. But if it's not, if it's not more than, 2 hours, then I do just fine. The other thing about running that 100 in Bend to Sisters was that I worked, one of my very first jobs was with Youth Conservation Corps. And I did a lot of trail clearing. So there was even a section of the trail near, what is it, Tumalo Creek, I want to say, that I could remember from my teen years of working on that trail. So that was also really cool. I did a lot of hiking and camping and hanging out with friends on all those trails and all the lakes around there when I was younger. And we didn't run up Bachelor, but we kind of ran like over, like maybe part way up Bachelor and then around it in one section of the trail. And I remember we hosted our prom, I want to say, on Bachelor one year. I think I was a sophomore. And we rode the lifts up, but it was a crazy snowstorm. So there's just a lot of little memories and stuff about running on the trails that were funny to think about while I was out there running too.
That's really cool. It sounds like that kind of helped with. I'm sure some of that distraction you need during a 100 miler, being able to think of some of those positive times you had in that area.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, we did need a lot of distractions. They had asked us not to wear headphones due to all the mountain bikers, but a lot of the wildlife too that had been seen. And I carried my headphones with me just in case the whole race, but I didn't use them. Um, and yeah, you really, it took a lot of like mental distraction at times, for sure.
I can only imagine. I haven't even done a marathon at this point, so I love talking to people who have done ultras and because it's just such a different thing. Like it sounds so cool. Like I want to do one at some point, but it just that like whole mental, whole body aspect of like you got to kind of be in tune and listen to yourself. That just it's so intriguing
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
So it's so you get there. You only had one person on your crew. I saw.
Yeah. So my best friend, decided to be my crew, and I had someone that had volunteered to pace with me, but I'd never had a pacer, so it wasn't like a have to situation, and they were traveling, so they didn't end up pacing me. So it's just my best friend who she is a registered nurse, so that made me feel pretty good. In case something bad did happen to me
That's
while I
it.
was out there. I was in really good hands. Ashley is her name. Um, and she'd never done anything like that. There's not really like runners in her family that I know of, or runners really in her life that much. But she's got 4 kids. I feel like she probably crews all the time for other things. So um, yeah, she's just really good, and she's like a caretaker kind of person too. So perfect person to have crew me, and you know. Um, well, we'll get to it, but there was a funny part of the race where she ended up being the very perfect person to keep me going, which is a funny little story we'll get to.
Yeah, for sure. And I was looking back over your your breakdown of the race, in preparation and talking to you and the different things, and it's yeah, there were some definite stories that stuck out. But let's start from the beginning. Like, how did it feel standing on that line, getting ready to do this big thing that you had been preparing a year for?
Well, I'm not a morning person. I don't know if you caught that from my posts. I've shared that at several races, especially when they begin at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. I am not awake, and sometimes I can't, get anything down before a race, which I hate. Not being able to get at least 300 calories in ahead of the race before taking off, because it just gets harder the longer you go to get those calories in. But yeah, so I was sleepy, sleepy, excited, still couldn't believe, I'd made it through all the training and was ready. There was also this thing that happened for me because I'd never run 50 miles before my 50 miler too. And it was only a month before, and I felt like I kind of didn't quite get to celebrate that. Um, so I came to the 100 miler, which was supposed to be the big finale of my training season, and I already felt like I was kind of good, like I ran my 50 miler and it was epic, and I had so much fun, and overall experience was just amazing. So the 4 weeks that was basically all tapering leading up to the 100 mile, I had this feeling of being like, I could go without. And there was also this thing that happened personally. My youngest dog had to have CCL surgery, which is basically this equivalent of ACL surgery for humans. So they had to reshape his tibia bone and put a plate to hold it back together until the bone grew back together, because they don't replace ACLs for dogs. And so that's why my spouse couldn't come and help crew either. They had to stay home and keep our dog on medications, and his mobility exercises and all of that. And he still can't play or run right now. It's a 16-week recovery, and so keeping him from playing or too many steps or those kinds of things. So that was another reason why I only had the one person crew. And so when I was there at the start of the 100, and just my bestie Ashley with me, I was really kind of just feeling like, okay, here we go, but like no big excitement or even nervousness like I had at other um, races throughout the season. So yeah, it was kind of a funny start for me to not have as much of a big build up and just kind of be at the start line like sleepy and like excited to just see what happened, really.
I think sometimes when you have that, like, you're just kind of almost let it go because of everything else. Like, that's when you tend to do the best, because there's not that pressure, those expectations or anything. So
Yeah.
that's probably better that you were able to be in that spot.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I was just ready to go out and have fun. And there had been, so much going on with my dog surgery and traveling up there for it. And I had just started a new wonderful job the week before as well. So my mind was way too busy to be too nervous for this race, which, yeah, I agree. It was probably a really good thing.
So one of the other things that stuck out to me that I was kind of a little surprised by was you had two different shoes that you used. And so I know, like, a lot of people will switch out shoes, but it tends to be like, I feel like it tends to be the same shoe. So, like, if they're going from uh, a Hoka, they're going to another Hoka or the same one or whatever, and you had two completely different shoes. Was that like a specific plan because of how the trail went, or was it just this is what I have?
Yeah, a little bit. So the trail was not supposed to be too rough for the first section. The more technical part doesn't come until later in the race. And so, and also at the beginning, I thought I wanted something just a little more light as well. Um, I really enjoy the cushion of Hoka's, but I don't like carrying the weight of that cushion. I didn't want to carry it for 100 miles too. So yeah, I don't know. It's always, kind of an experiment. I feel like that's the biggest experiment of all of this. Ultra running has been shoes for me and just finding the right ones. The Hokas that I wore, the Speed Goats, and I wore them for my 50-mile race, and it was only my third time putting them on, but I could already just tell that there was going to be zero issues, that they were going to do wonderful. And the 54K that I had run in Arizona, I had used, oh, what are they called? Topo. And I loved those, but they started to give me pressure on my left middle toe. And my left foot is like maybe like almost a quarter size bigger than my right, which I think is opposite of most people. Um, but so that is like where I can tell if like I need to do a half size up for shoes. So I did that with my shoes for the 100 just in case. And so that was the other thing, is the Hokas were a half size up. And I wanted to make sure that I had that roominess at the end of the race in case I had any swelling in my feet.
Well, that makes sense, and sounds really thought out actually, which is good considering how far you had to go. So,
Yeah.
um, what was your fueling like? What have you learned through this journey that works well for you?
Yeah. So, well, I started the year off as a Noon ambassador, actually. And so I use Noon a lot for hydration, but it doesn't have much calories. And so I decided to try, well, I like, gels, but mostly they're just a lot of sugar. And I don't love having a lot of sugar in my diet. And so I found Spring Energy, and the Spring Energy works really, really well for me. And so by the middle of the summer, that's pretty much what I was using all the time. And so then I started using their hydration as well. And their hydration has it's like apple juice, a little bit of vinegar, some ginger, mint. So it has everything in it that like rehydrates you, but it also has the ginger and mint in that like helps settle your stomach. So those
Yeah.
kind of things with Spring Energy, just they really, really, really work well for me. And the wonderful lucky thing that happened to me was I bought a box of Spring Energy bars, and I won $200 to spend on
Oh wow.
Spring. Yeah, on the Spring website just before my 50-miler, and so I was able to get most of the fuel that I needed for those races with that win. And then, of course, I that you'd be surprised at how quickly that goes when you're running ultras, actually. I had to like, get hydration separately and stuff. So that's what works really well for me. I am gluten free. I have Hashimoto's. So I have to avoid gluten, and there's a few other things sometimes that will bother my system. So a lot of times aid stations are not friendly for me. So if there's potato chips, I'm pretty good. If there's pickles or pickle juice or watermelon, I go for those things. And so but I don't plan on it because you never know when everything there is going to be like little peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or tortillas with peanut butter or um, uh, things, just a bunch of stuff that I can't have, which happened at the Cascades. So I was really glad I was carrying so much spring energy and that I had some of my favorite foods with Ashley, my crew. Um, so basically, I had some drinks that were like high calorie. I think they're like 220 in calories, ready for me at all the cruise stops with Ashley, so that if I was kind of falling behind on my fueling, I could just drink that and it would have a lot of calories in it. And then I had things like potato chips and pickles and pickle juice in case the aid stations didn't have those, because pickle juice always helps me if I start to get headaches or anything like that. And watermelon always goes down really easy for me too. So I like to have that around. And then in a last minute decision that was really good, I grabbed these gluten-free coffee cake muffins from Trader Joe's, and those were like candy. And I had some of those when I'd see Ashley, just to like, it was nice to have something that you could chew. Um, yeah, so that's what I did. And then at one point, just before running through the night, I had a pot of instant potatoes, and that was pretty much epic. That was one of my favorite moments, was just sitting there with a whole pot of instant potatoes in my lap and just going to town before heading out for the night.
You were not the first person to say that the instant mashed potatoes were a win
Yeah,
that I've talked
very.
to with cultures.
It was nice to have a hot meal too, just to have something hot instead of everything being, lukewarm or whatever the air temperature was.
Well, I think, and it's interesting, you talked about carrying, having to carry your own food because of being gluten free. And so that I was going to ask you because you had, in one of the recaps, you talked about how there was like 14 aid stations, but only 5 were accessible to crew.
Yeah. So that was another difficult thing in not often having things at the aid stations that I could consume, is that I really did have to carry everything. Sometimes I think the farthest I went was the overnight before seeing Ashley again. So I think it was like from 11 at night to like 7 in the morning. And of course, I wasn't really all that hungry through the night, but the first leg was 36 miles without seeing Ashley.
Oh,
So, carrying, basically completing a 50K without seeing your crew is how you start off the race. And so, yeah, those things are hard, and you really have to plan carefully if you have any dietary restrictions or any like special needs.
yeah, that sounds rough.
Yeah.
How was that night run? Because there was a story you talked about in there that I thought was pretty amazing. But what was that like? Going through the night running. That's always such a intriguing thing as well to me.
Yeah, I had in my training, I had jumped in on that 8 mile night race in Santa Fe. And then my friend had also gotten up and met me in the Sandia foothills for at 3 in the morning for another 8 mile loop. Um, in the dark, and so I at least knew how I did in the dark, and I was able to like troubleshoot my waist lamp, which I learned in training and happened also at the race, that it really only lasted a couple of hours when I was supposed to last 8 hours. And so having a headlamp backup was key for my overnight. So I was, well, I had picked up some bear spray because they had warned a lot about the wildlife. So I had picked up some bear spray, like hot off the plane in Eugene before we drove over the Cascades to the race. And when I headed out after that, those, distracting mashed potatoes, I did not put my bear spray on for the night. And I realized it a couple miles out. And so that right there made me a little weary in the night. But, it's one of those things where you just don't think about it. You're like, there's nothing that can be done. So don't dwell on it. Don't think about it. Um, don't get yourself more worked up than is warranted, until you are met with the situation. But so because of that, also I decided just to make sure that I was near another runner. So I made sure there was like a headlamp either behind me or in front of me for pretty much almost the whole night. Not until the dawn broke on the horizon did I go ahead and let go of like hanging out with another runner through the night.
Yeah.
And so the nighttime was interesting for me, in that usually that's when you get hallucinations, but I didn't get any hallucinations until actually the sun was up and had been up for a little bit, and then those started. But knowing that it helps to just really, really focus on the trail right in front of you and not to look off to the sides or around you. And so I did that as well. Like I made sure to keep it, tunnel vision and not look around for the night also. And what else happened in the night? So in keeping up with other runners searching for headlamps one after the other in the dark, I came across a few people and they had a pacer with them, and the pacer started this conversation about like uh, things happening to runners at night in the dark, or like murders that were happening in the woods, and just all of that kind of stuff. And I can't remember what I said to her now, but I kind of, after a while, I was like, this is really like not cool of a pacer to be out here telling these, like horrific stories in the night while there's people running around out here, possibly scared, trying to get through their race. And so I said something, and she laughed it off, and she kept going on with the stories of murders she knew about in various national parks and things. And I was like, I gotta get out of here. So I picked up the pace and continued on. And not too long after that, I started running with a woman named Jill. And Jill and I pretty much stuck together through most of the night. It wasn't until the end of the night. And the trail was pretty technical, about starting at about maybe like 3 a.m. or so. And so that started to wear on my ankles, especially all the rocks. And there was like holes in the trail that you could lose your whole foot in. And yeah, it was really rough. And there was manzanita brush that would cover the trail that you just had to push through, so you couldn't use your poles to help balance you either in a lot of the sections. And so eventually, after the sky started to lighten in the distance, I told Jill, like, my ankles really hurt. I gotta, be careful on this section. I was like, go ahead if you got to go, and I'll see you if I see you. And so she did decide to go on, keep the same pace, and I slowed down a little bit for that section. And that was the only section where I was really like running through the dark alone. Um, and I want to say, I can't remember how many miles that was from the aid station, the next aid station where we came in. And there was crew at that station after the night. So all I could do is just, keep one foot in front of the other and just like think of Ashley being at the next aid station and just to get to her. So I think it was a really nice thing that I had a crew member that was my best friend. So I,
Right.
I looked forward to that, really close interaction. We've been friends for a really, really long time and we've been through a lot together. So, in looking forward to the crew stations, it wasn't just like looking forward to like a quick chat or fuel or, something like that. It was like, it was looking forward to a hug.
Right. I think that's, even without that connection to running or being a runner, I think that's an important thing. Like someone that just knows you can
Yeah.
be so helpful.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that she kind of helped you keep on going. Everybody, and definitely in the hundreds, seems to come to these points of like, I can't do this anymore. So, what was your low point, and how did she help you out through that?
Yeah, I guess that pain cave that everybody talks about is where I was coming into that aid station around 7 a.m. Maybe it was a little bit before 7 that I came in. I can't quite remember what time I came in, but um, it's just really, really getting tired at that point, being up all night and through the day before. But yeah, I came in and I just couldn't even say anything at first because I had been in pain, like mentally and physically for so many miles at that point. At least the last 10 miles or so, um, but probably longer than that. Like the wee hours of the night and the morning are just really kind of foggy. All I remember is like just feeling like I couldn't do it anymore and I didn't want to do it anymore and just tired of the manzanita brush and the rocks. And I was really surprised at mile 80 or so when that race photographer took those photos. I was surprised that I didn't look like really angry in them or like I was about to cry because I had felt like I'm either I like I'm gonna have like angry tears like in these photos or something. But that's how I felt coming into the aid station too, just like really upset with um how the trail was feeling at that point and just not feeling like I could push myself the way that I had always been able to. I finally felt like maybe I had found the pain cave that everybody talks about, and I found that point where you you somehow have to push past it all on your own, and nobody can really help you do that if you can't like find it within yourself too. But yeah, a funny thing happened with Ashley when I came in. I knew I was gonna start crying, and I didn't want to. And she's like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "Not okay." That's all I could say. And she's like, "What do you need? Like, what can I do?" And I was like, I just need to sit in the car. And so I like climbed in the front seat and, I just let myself cry a little bit. And then she handed me a banana and I asked where my cold brew was that I had started the race with, because I didn't drink at all. And she got me that and a cold brew and a banana. Those are actually really good together. And I started to feel a little bit better once I had a little caffeine and the banana. And then uh, I told Ashley, I was like, I don't want to go back out. And and Ashley and I had been joking in the car ride about how as we were getting older, our hearing was getting worse. And it turns out that Ashley did not hear me when I said I don't want to go back out. And that was my lowest point, was like uttering those words out loud that I didn't want to go back out. And I know my voice was like breaking when I said it. It was like really hard for me to admit. Because I've never had a DNF in any race ever. And and being at mile 85 and feeling like I really didn't want to go run the last 15 was horrible to admit out loud, even though I'd been running through my head for quite a few miles. And Ashley responded with, okay, what do you want in your pack? And I was like, okay, I guess, you know, quitting is not an option. Ashley's not going to let me. And it turns out she literally just did not hear me. Um, so that was a really funny story for us to realize afterwards. I thought she was just, telling me like quitting's not an option and you're going back out there. And so I told her what I wanted in my pack and then swapped out my socks and I put on some compression toe socks, and I think that helped so much with my ankles, and my left foot flexor at that point just didn't really want to lift my foot anymore. And so that was the hardest thing I was going through physically. Um, it's like a weird feeling and also really painful that your foot flexor doesn't want to lift your foot up. And so that started to make my gait be a little off. And because my gait was a little off, that made other things start hurting that I hadn't had hurt in my training at all. And so, um, yeah, that's the pain that I was going through. And the compression socks helped a lot. And Ashley ignoring that I didn't want to go back out helped a lot. And then she asked me if I wanted to lay down in the van that I had a good hour before the cutoff. And I was like, okay, I'll lay down. So I was just shivering really, really, really cold. And it was just from being still mostly. And so I wrapped myself up in this big down blanket in the back and I laid there for about 20 minutes and I kept looking at my watch and the time ticking by. And I was like, no, I need to go. Like, I can't like waste my cushion of time in case anything comes up. And so I told Ashley, I was like, okay, I want to leave by 8 a.m. And I think I spent about 50 minutes there total at that aid station, and 20 of it laying down, and the rest was like bathroom and fueling and crying and mustering up the courage to push past the pain and get back out there. And so, yeah, I told Ashley I want to leave by 8. I could have stayed there until 9, technically.
Yeah.
So we got me all set back up, and I didn't even bother changing out anything besides my socks. And I took off a puffer vest that I had used through the night and headed back out. And I wasn't going to see Ashley again until the last aid station before the finish. So I headed out knowing I had like, another half day basically before I would see Ashley again, if I remember right.
Right. Wow. Well, it sounds
Yeah.
like she gave you the right advice at the right time, inadvertently, which is still great. But I do want to jump ahead because you got up, you got out of there, you set that time, and you went, and then you get to the finish line, and your story about the finish line is pretty amazing. So I want to make sure we get a chance for you to really talk about coming into that finish line.
Yeah. So, so the last aid station I came through, and on my plan I had, refueling and rehydrating and all this kind of stuff. And I came in and I was having a real hard time, still with my foot flexor, and just everything hurt really bad. And so when I came through that last aid station, I handed off my hat to Ashley, and I said, fill it with ice, because I was starting to actually overheat. I think it was like 90 that day at that point, and there was no heat training that could prepare you for being overheated after you've already run, you know, 90 miles, 94 miles at that point or something. I had 6 miles left to go, and then I told Ashley to just fill my hydration with whatever they had at the aid station. I knew it was gnarly, and I hadn't tried it yet, but I just needed a different flavor. And so she did that. I hopped, back on the trail. And she had told me that my dad and my stepmom had arrived, and that they would be with her at the finish to see me. So that was really motivating. I hadn't seen my dad since before the pandemic started. Last time I was up, I had flown up there to see my grandpa. Um, and so it had been at least, I want to say it was like 4 years since I had seen my dad. And so I was really excited that my dad would be at the finish. And my dad was a big runner in my life when I was growing up. He and my oldest brother would run together, and we had this half marathon loop we would do a lot of the time. And my dad I would be on a bike. Uh, I learned how to bike just specifically so I could go with him when he was running. And I remember
Wow.
being 6, and we would get to big hills, and he would run next to me and with his hand on my back, and he would push me on my bike up the big hills that I wasn't strong enough to make it up while he was running with me. So
Wow.
my dad was a big runner in my life, and my grandpa as well. But so I was really happy that my dad was going to be there at the finish of this really big accomplishment for me. And so that was super motivating. And I headed out, and within a mile, I followed a group of people that went down this country road. And it was kind of a weird turn, but, I saw, a group of like 6 people ahead of me. So I thought that was fine. I realized pretty quickly that I didn't see them around anymore. And realized I didn't see any markers anymore, and that I was off course. I quickly text Ashley, and I was like, I can't get the map to pull up. Like, I was in a panic because at that point I didn't know how far off I was on time, and I didn't know what my cushion was, but I knew I was coming up against it with how slow my pace had gotten. And so I sent Ashley this panic text, and I know that she's not like gonna know how to pull up the race map via GPX or GXP file and find the right, application for me to load it on and find out where I'm at. So I quick decision. Okay, just backtrack. Like, if you're gonna finish this in time, you just gotta you just gotta act. And so I started backtracking down the road, and then I saw where the turn changed, and I could see these runners going by, and I spotted these three guys that I had been leapfrogging with at the beginning of our race, and I saw them, and I just like popped out behind them, and I was like, "Hey guys," and they were like, "Oh, hey." And I was like, "I got lost. So great to see you all." And so we ran together. They had a pacer with them, and one of them was also hallucinating, and so it was nice to know that I wasn't the only one at that point. Though they had gotten a lot better for me, but um, yeah. So stuck with them for the last of the race pretty much, and about 2 miles from the finish, well, about 3 miles from the finish, these guys started pulling ahead. I just couldn't like muster the pace that I had been shooting for, and I knew that they were pushing to come in at, what were they? I think they were shooting for noon, um, which was an okay cushion. So I wanted to at least keep them in my sights, just to know that I would make it on time. And so I was
Right.
trying really hard with my shuffle run that I had developed with my foot flexor not wanting to work. Um, and so they were up this hill a little ways, and I see this like guy walking past them, swinging his arms, and he's wearing suspenders, and I was like, "Dad, is that you?" And my dad's like, "Well, Ashley said you got lost, so I said I was gonna go find you." And he had checked in with the race if he could go and find me, and so he turned around and he speed walked ahead of me, which was as fast as my run was at that point, and he caught us up to the guys that I had been running with. We ran with them for the um, well, my dad walked and I ran with them for the remainder of the miles. And it was just a funny experience because, my dad's telling dad jokes, and he's started telling their pacer, all about how he had open heart surgery the year before, and his how his pacer made it back to his house like faster than he did, his heart pacer. And so, yeah, at one point I was like, "Dad, are you telling a dad joke?" And they're all cracking up. Um, it was a really great distraction for the last 2 miles, that's for sure, and a real high note to get to see my dad after years, and finish out the race with him. And I said to him, I was like, "Dad, I don't think you're allowed to do this. You're not an official pacer."
Right.
And I was like, "I don't really care at this point, though." And he was like, "No, no, we asked. Like, I asked them, and they said it was okay." So that was a relief that I wouldn't be like disqualified when I came with my dad in his jeans and suspenders. But we got almost to the finish, and those three guys that we had been running with, my dad, he was really trying everything to motivate me, and he was like, "Why don't you pass these guys and show them, just how, like, how, I don't know what he said, how fast you can be, or something like that." And I just laughed at him. But then he said, "If you've got 7 minutes if you want to make the next, like, stay under like the half an hour mark." And I was like, "Okay, we can do that. Like, let's do that, Dad. 7 minutes." Like, I could see the finish, ahead of, like, over a road and around, some buildings on a track. And so we got all the way over there to the parking lot, and then you had to run down the sidewalk around some tennis courts or something like that. And then so we continued on that dirt track that was headed toward the sidewalk. And the three guys that we were running with, they were like, hey, this is your moment. Why don't you two go ahead, like, go run in together. You haven't seen each other in so long. We'll hang back. And
That's
that
amazing.
was like, yeah, I know, so special. They were willing to like hold back on their finish time to let me and my dad have, our moment together coming in for my first 100-mile race. And my dad is still chatting with these guys, and I like had taken off, and so I look back and I was like, Dad, come on, we gotta go. So he runs a little faster. He's like running at this point to catch up with me, and so he catches up. We round the corner where the tennis courts were, and then I see the track there, and there's this big, blown up balloon arch that you always go under at the end of races.
Right.
And so in my mind, I thought that was the finish. And so we run under that. And then I'm like, oh, there's a whole track here. And they're like, you have to run around the track. And
Oh.
and so my dad and I start running around the track, and he turns to me and he's like, I don't know if I can keep up this pace the whole way around. And he had just been telling the guys about his open heart surgery that happened during the pandemic. And I was like, I immediately was concerned, and
Right.
it didn't matter, finishing whatever my time was, as long as my dad was, feeling okay. So I was like, Dad, it doesn't matter if you cut the track. Like, I'll do the whole loop, you cut across, meet me on the other side. And so he was like, I could see the wheels turning, like he didn't like, saving face, cutting across and not running the whole thing with me. And I was like, Dad, just go. Like, I'll catch up to you. And so he's like, okay. And so he cuts across, he like walked across the field and met me on the backside. And I kind of slowed down a little bit because I just wanted to give him time to catch his breath. And so I ran around the backside of the track, caught up to him on the other side on the last corner. And then we just slow jogged in together, and we got towards the finish, and he was like, you have to go that way. So I ran under the actual finish arch,
Again.
much smaller. Yeah. by myself. And that was that. And then immediately upon finishing, everybody that was there came over and gave me hugs and congrats. And I was like, I gotta lay down before I throw up. Like the nausea just like hit me, and it didn't go away for a while.
Wow, that is an amazing finish. That's an amazing story of the finish. Like to have your dad there, not seen him for so long after, again having surgery, like, even dealing with all that nausea and everything, like that must have been such an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And, growing up with my dad being a runner, and me always accompanying him on runs in the summers, and to have him next to me jogging in with me to my finish on a big race. And he has never come to any of my races before since we live so far apart. And so, yeah, that was pretty epic to see my dad like running through the woods to come find me, and then for him to pace me 2 miles back to the finish and be able to run in with me. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it definitely sounds like it. And you posted some videos on your Instagram of that and the finish and stuff. And so seeing that was pretty awesome from that outside perspective as well.
Yeah. And it was nice to have him there also, just to help me get up. and stay steady for the next hour, a few hours. When we were visiting afterwards, they had brought a camper down, and they all wanted me to go rest and, sit in the camper afterwards. And I wanted to wait. I waited until the last person came through before we did that. But yeah, I had to have some help, like even getting around or stepping up into the camper, any of that stuff. And it's amazing. Like, you just ran you just ran 100 miles, and then all of a sudden you can't walk 2 steps.
Right.
Your body's just like, okay, I'm done.
I was gonna say that because it's always so fascinating. Like you're able to keep yourself going for whatever that distance is, and then
Yeah.
afterward, it's just like I have nothing left.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many people around us were like, on the ground, not able to move also. And tons of people were just throwing up as soon as they came in. It was a thing.
Yeah.
My dad
Well,
was talking to some guy sitting next to us on the picnic tables after, and they were trying to get me a little bit of nutrients in
right.
and hydration to keep that going. And the guy next to him had to take breaks every few sentences to throw up. it was its own different kind of finish after that race than most of the shorter races that I've been
Right.
in.
Well, and even your post, like talking about how after all of that, 100 miles and that, like your feet actually came through in pretty good condition.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I did have a little bit of rubbing on the inside of my heel. And then my heels are kind of bruised and my feet were swollen, but
Yeah.
that was about it. Like I had way more pain for my first ultra, my 50K the year before, I want to say, than this one. I mean, I was sore everywhere for a couple days, and it was really hard to get moving. But during, I don't know, it was just different. There wasn't as much of that roaming pain feeling that I had
Right.
had in my first ultra. It was like distinctly my foot flexor on that left side, and then my left hamstring hurt a bit after. And I've noticed since in recovery that like if I do too much, it still starts to feel kind of twingy.
Right.
But that's it. It's pretty amazing. My feet did want to continue to swell in the days afterward as well. Like if I did too much walking around or anything like that.
Right.
So, my bestie registered nurse was like, that's it. Go lay down, put your feet up, elevate them. We had a couple hour drive back over the mountain to where I was going to fly out. And we actually stopped, and I put my feet in an ice cold river for a good 10 minutes. Ooh, it
Nice.
hurt, but it took down the swelling right away. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, like you talked about, it's been a little while since. Um, what's do you have anything coming up next, or you just still basking in recovery and what you accomplished?
Yeah. I immediately started, peeking to see what was on the horizon, what other races there were. And I thought really hard about signing up for a race in Utah at a place I just really love camping there. And I know how beautiful it is. But I didn't do it. I didn't pull the trigger. I've been going for pretty much one short run on the weekends every weekend since, like 3 miles, just whatever feels fun or feels good for that day. And
Yeah,
then hot yoga, biking here and there, but really just taking it super duper easy.
good.
Yeah.
I'm sure your body definitely thanks you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they say you're supposed to take as many days rest as you did miles. So that's 100 days rest from training. Of course, it was too much for me, and I, went for a run 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
but yeah, no training for anything yet. But I have quite a few of races on my mind for January, February, March, like an earlier season than I got started with last year, and just
Awesome.
trying some new races that I hadn't tried before.
Cool. Well, hopefully that'll be fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's a great spot to wrap up. And so I just have one more question for you. The same thing I ask everybody, and that's what are you listening to get you out there, get you going, either for a recovery run or bike ride or whatever.
Yeah. I have a few playlists that I really like listening to that are all like kind of higher tempo. Um, Everything from like some indie music to like French swing music. Um, Really fun stuff. Sylvan Esso is one of my faves.
Yeah.
Just a great beat to run to. Super happy music. I started listening to this song this summer called Sunburn, and it's like been stuck in my head because there's a bike bell in it. And the first time or two it came on my station, I looked around for the bike that was around me. And so I don't know why, but just that like humorous moment, like training this summer, like that song really reminds me of training for this 100. And it's just really fun. Makes me laugh, makes me smile. So
That's awesome.
yeah. You'll have to listen to it so you can hear the bike bell I'm talking about.
I know. I just wrote a little note down real quick, sunburn. So
Yeah.
um, that's awesome. So thank you again for your time. That is 100 miles is so amazing. It's quite an accomplishment. And then everything else around it. Like, that's so awesome. So thank you for sharing that with me, with everybody who's listening. And, is there anything else you would like to say before I let you go?
Uh, no, not really. I mean, it's still sinking in that I even accomplished that. Just last night, I was talking with my spouse and I was like, how many miles is it to Santa Fe? I ran that. How many more is it to Espanola? Because we drive up to Taos a lot.
Yeah.
And Renee was like, you basically ran from here to the canyon that you hit before you go to Taos. And I was like, no way. Like, I did not. You still just, even after you accomplish something like this, it takes time to wrap your head around that you did it. And you absolutely should revel in it. Anybody, whether it's like your first half marathon, marathon, it doesn't matter the distance. Like, take the time, enjoy it, revel in it, pat yourself on the back for weeks, months, um,
Exactly.
yeah, just find joy and be proud of your accomplishments.
I'd once again like to thank my guest for their time and thank you for tuning in. If you have the opportunity, please rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, or just help spread the word. Music was provided by Philip Friedman. You can follow him on SoundCloud at DJ Teach. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at RunningNM. Feel free to drop me a line or shoot me an email at runningnewmexico@gmail.com if you have any questions or know of someone who should be interviewed. In the meantime, keep running, New Mexico.